All right. So this video is for managing roles and permissions within the CPD DMS system. At the current release, I'm going to show you how it's done now. This may change in the future. As an O&M responsibility, we are trying to integrate with your LDAP system. So hopefully, if we can get it set up correctly, that the default role and group will come from new hires and be managed by the LDAP and not manually managed within the Quark application. But we'll show how it currently is right now. So I am logged into the pre-prod server here, and I just want to show, if I go to CPS management, I myself am just a environmental compliance specialist right now, but I'm in a very specific group called permissions management. So we can add users to this group, and that will give that user the permission to manage permissions of other users. So anybody can be in that. Doesn't have to be a specific role like ADM or NDL or something. So as long as we can add them to this permissions management group, then they can add and remove users from groups, add users to the system, and they can change the drop-down value list. So if I switch over to this window, so just notice the difference in the URLs here. So the first one is preprod/workspace, and then for the admin screen, it's going to be preprod/admin. Now this is very cut down to just allowing the users to do user and group functionality and attributes. So if I show how mine looks, so this is how the admin looks, right? There's storage, there's content, there's workflows. So this is where we manage all of that. And that's an area we do not want any user to have access to, because they could like ruin permissions, they could ruin workflows, they could delete attributes, and they could delete national standard and things like that. So this version is the cut down version to just managing user groups and attributes. So if I click on user profiles, this is everybody. I can filter these drop down lists here. Everyone's in here. Now, again, anyone we give this permission to, it's very serious of a task. So you could remove somebody from here with this. Actually, I made it so you can't remove them. So deleting a user will probably still be a TSPI or an O&M support function to do. So like, let's take Christopher Lawrence here. If I double click on him, the only option here is, again, these are all managed through the LDAP, is I can change his default role, and then I can disable his login. So I can change him to a NDL, I can change him to an ADM at the top, and yes, you could give somebody administrator access, and that would open up a lot of issues too. So if I wanted to add a new user, and so this part I'm not sure how comfortable you guys will feel. So if I go under, I don't have anybody. Let's just take his, no, we can do that. Let's take his email address. So if I go to add a new user here, sorry, I want to import user and group from LDAP on the right here. And that will go and it'll get, if I do a search criteria, I can do mail, and then I can do their email address. And I can do count here, and that will see one result found, but there's no one in the list because they're already been imported. So in the event that this was a new employee, they could be added here and then added to the right, and that would import a new user into the system. So that's why we always ask for your email address, is because that's what's tied to your LDAP account, and then that's what would bring you into the Quark system. If you didn't want to manage this part, that's something that TSPI and the O&M contract can do. They can add the user to Quark for you, and then you can manage their roles and groups, which I'll show next. So this is potentially the only sort of really admin function. So as I showed before, if you want to change their role, so remember their role is what they see in the new drop-down list. It affects what CPS management buttons they see. It affects what options they have when they right-click on a document. So that's all defined by the role, by this, right? Because the user can only have one role. So that's the state technical lead. So just to highlight that more, so the difference between the state technical lead role and the state discipline lead role is the state discipline lead is going to have access to all those CPS management buttons. The state technical lead does not. In the event of an ADM, they're going to see in that new drop-down list an HCP index, FR summaries document, whereas an NDL would not see those. They would only see, short and long summary, practice overview, and those type of documents. And then, for instance, a QAT user would again have no CPS management buttons, and they would have no values in the drop-down list because they're not allowed to create any documents. So for a role, we always define the highest role. So you could be, let's say you were an NDL let's say you were a state discipline lead and an IRC member. Your role would be the highest, so that would be a state discipline lead. That would be your role. And then we would add you to both groups. So we'd add you to the group of state, whatever state you're in, so like Virginia, and then you'd also get added to the IRC group. So you'd have those two groups. Does anybody have any questions about the difference between role and group? And then I'll show you how to add people to a group.
So Dustin,
Yeah.
what about for like the disciplines at the national level? The difference between the national agricultural engineer, say, and the national agronomist. How does that part work into it?
Yep, so good question, Bill. So that is by the groups. So as a role, you guys are all just national discipline leads, just generic. All across the board, everyone would be a national discipline lead. Now, if I go to the groups, so over here on the left, groups, that is where we see, let me scroll down a little bit, you have a group for each of the lead disciplines. And then as well as on the group, we have a group for every state discipline lead, and we have a group for every state technical lead. So I'm just going to pop back over to Quark real quick. So by default, I'll right click on national here and hit edit. So if I go to groups, at the high level of national, it's all CPS users, and then this shouldn't be here. It's all CPS users and then CPS administrators. So by default, every user in this all CPS users group has read-only permissions. So as I go further down now, let me go to CEDAE and right click and do edit. Go to groups. Now we have, where am I? Am I pre-prod? Yeah. So now we have the ADMs group added, and again, this one's here. And all CPS users. So now we have added the ADMs. So the ADMs, and the reason ADM is here is because ADMs are allowed to create new collections and things. So if I go save and I come under one more, and I go to zipline here and do edit. So now we have more groups. So now we have the environment specialists, we have IRCs, we have NDLs, we have PSRCs, we have QA. So if you look here, we only have the AE National Discipline Lead. So if I go to, let's say, CE here and edit this one, we now have the CE National Discipline Lead. So the collections are based off of the groups. And if I go to a dual discipline here, you're going to have both of the, make this any bigger? No. So you're going to have both the National Discipline Lead groups, right? You have the primary and you have the secondary. But if you look at the role, the secondary is the secondary role, and then the primary would be the primary role. Any questions?
And how do you define the primary versus the secondary?
Good question. So in the event, right, so we've already done that for all of these dual disciplines. So if you were creating, let's say, like a new dual discipline, we'll make a separate video for that, but you would just click here. You would add them to the group here, and then you would choose their role here. So the same way, right, that we add the NTL, right? So let's say I'm adding, let's say Alan Claiborne here, and we were making him an NTL for that, for this collection, or this, let's say collection year, right? Is that Alan Claiborne's NTL for grassed waterways in 2015. So you can kind of do the same thing with groups, that the National Discipline Lead Agron is the secondary on this practice.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So now, I said it before earlier, role, right? So role is this new drop-down menu, and since my role is environmental compliance specialist, I can't do anything in the new drop-down menu. And then again, it affects my CPS management. I see no buttons. So if I logged in, who do I have open here? Just log in as somebody else so you can see. Okay, so if this is on one of my other servers, but right, I logged in as Bill Rack here, and so now when I do the new drop-down menu, I have all of these documents, like the index, and then specifications, and then if I go to the CPS management screen, I have all the buttons. So that's where my role is. My role is ADM here. So that's those UI elements are what is controlled by the role. And then the group is what collections and what documents you can have access to. Okay, so let's go back to the management here. So we have all the different groups in here. Let's make it a little bigger. So if I wanted to add a new person to CEDAE as a new lead discipline, I would just double click it. And then I'm going to see all of the users that are already in NDL here on the right. And then I can click this existing users part and it'll sort it alphabetically. And then you can search for whoever you want to add and then add them over. I strongly emphasize do not change the name and do not change the default role. Those are things I can't restrict you from editing, so anyone that has this permission does have the ability to change those. But if you do change them, that will cause issues in the system, as these names are directly correlated to other things programmatically. And that works for everyone. So if in the event that we have a state discipline lead for Alabama, it's Eugene here. So I can add Eugene to Alabama, and then I can also add Eugene as the IRC, and he might already be in here. Yep, so then I could add Eugene into the IRC group. So then he's now in 2 groups. So he'll get the IRC emails whenever a national standard hits internal review, and then he'll also have permissions over Alabama as a state discipline lead. Any questions so far? Okay. So at the top, you will see the IRDT groups. Now, this is something I don't know if we're still continuing to do, but it was a requirement kind of at the beginning of the project to form these IRDT groups, and then you could route the national standard to this group and as a team edit the document. And then Elise had brought up that you could do a Skype meeting and you guys could get together and edit the document that way. But in the event that you want to continue to use that group, the way we had kind of set it up would be code number year IRDT-CPS. So if I wanted to add a new group, I would do the plus sign here at the bottom. And then I would do whatever code I wanted. So let's do 558 2018 IRDT-CPS. And I would choose them to be the interdisciplinary review team. And then I could add all of my members here and save it. And then so I would have created a new interdisciplinary review team. But the issue is that this needs to be added to the collection. So similar to the NTL way, we'll go to that collection, so 555, and we'll edit it. We'll do edit collection, go to groups, and then we'd add a new group here with the plus sign, and then we would choose that interdisciplinary review team and add them on. And then that would allow routing to that group as well. Any questions about that?
I have a question, Dustin.
Yep.
So, yeah, go back where you were there with at the collection view. So, we have the collection, we have the 555 rock barrier, and then you have the collections underneath that. So when I'm adding, say, a national technical or a national team lead to, say, the new 2018, should I not be adding them to the 555 rock barrier, the top one, just add them to the 2018? Because in the past, I've gone to the 555 rock barrier, added them there, and then, in the part where it says override to the children, I've selected that so that they get, all the, access to all of the groups.
Yep.
And part of my reason for doing that is, sometimes they need access to like the old 2015, because there might be some stuff in there that they need to take a look at and decide whether they want it in 2018 or not.
Yeah, no, Bill, that's actually perfectly fine that you did that. So just so everyone sees visually how you did that. So let's say I added Barry here and I changed him to a national team lead. I can now have this option to apply settings to child collections and do override and merge. So merge will not delete anybody from the existing one. So let's say you had Eric as the national team lead for 2018 and wanted to keep him there. Merge will just add Barry and Eric together. If I did override, that's going to remove Eric as the NTL and add Barry in its place. So now if I hit save here, that will then add, whoops, user profiles, Barry, and he'll be the national team lead. So Bill, yeah, that's perfectly fine, and you gave a valid reason on why you'd want to do that. So yeah, that's perfectly okay. Just you have the difference in override and merge if you wanted to have separate NTLs for the different year collections for whatever reason, and you wanted the old NTL to remain there, then override would technically kick them out if you.
So that's good to know. I have another question kind of related. So you added somebody to the 2018 and made them NTL, and they hadn't been NTL before.
Mm-hmm.
So does that add them to the NTL group from that point forward? And would they get the NTL emails if I was to send out an email to NTL?
So there is no NTL group. There is only a National Discipline League group. And the reason that there is no NTL group is because they're added on the collection. So yeah, great question. That email is sent off of the roll. So in that event, they would probably not get the email. They would only get the email if their role was specified here.
How do I add them there? And I think you went over that, but just show me again.
So with this, okay, let's say you'd add the user. Either TSPI is going to add it with this import LDAP thing here. Then once they're in the system, let's say this test user is the new person you added, I would double click on them, and then I would change their default role to NTL.
Got it.
Now, in the event that I guess, would there ever be a case where would you change an NDL down to an NTL like let's say Eric's the NDL for Agron and you want him to be the team lead in an AE standard? Would that ever happen?
Well, typically what happens to be who was a national team lead like Hamid Farahami, who is temporarily for 120 days acting as the national discipline lead. So we would make him the national discipline lead until we as an agency hired somebody else. So, and at that point in time, he would go back to being a national team lead.
Gotcha. Okay.
Would the fact that we don't have the minus thing there, would that keep us from being able to change him, or?
No, you can change anybody's role. The minus is saying you can't purge him out of the system. So yeah, you can change anybody.
Okay, so if somebody retires, our current way to remove them from the system would be to use our O&M process, or I guess our help desk in Fort Collins.
No, you'd have to do the ECM support email to remove them from Quark. Currently, right now.
Could we just essentially strip them of all roles and just leave them there? I mean, it's not really going to be a problem for several years, so maybe we could just strip them of all the roles and leave it at that. Short term.
The
You know
only
what I mean?
the only issue that might cause is if we're counting up number of licenses.
Yep.
Right. Yes, that's a good point.
Yep. So yeah. So yes, you technically just hit this disable logon button if you really didn't want them to log in. But yeah, they're going to keep taking a license as long as they're in this window. So what I was going to say is, so right now it's manual on removing or adding them. Long term, we want it integrated with the LDAP, so if they retire and are removed, then from this Quark group, let's say, they would get removed from Quark. And then if you added somebody and specified them to be to the Quark group as NDL, then they would automatically get added in, whenever the system refreshes. So that's something they're still currently working on. So we'll need to re-go over that process whenever it's fully implemented. But for now, it's a manual adding them and removing them.
Dustin, is there a way that I can print this list of users and roles or copy it to a spreadsheet?
So I can. So yeah, you've asked me that question several times. So I will figure out a way for you to be able to do that and let you know of it. So as of right now, I don't have that solution for you.
Okay, great. That would be good for us to be able to do, so I don't have to bug you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Let me write that down.
Say that again. What was the question?
Take this list and export it to a spreadsheet. I can see right here. I can see several people retired.
Yeah, I was thinking that, Bill, that there has to be a way to manage the list, because you also want to know the ones on that where the role has been taken away, the disabled, but then either turn them on or delete them or whatever. So I don't know if Quark can do that, can access those, or you just would know the its current status.
Does anybody else have any questions about roles and groups? And then I'll show the attributes next.
Show me about the states and how I would know if somebody was currently a part of the Alabama group or the Alaska group.
So we would just go to that group. So we'd scroll down here, and then we'd find State Discipline Lead Alabama. Just double click on it. And then on the right will be anybody in the Alabama group. And then I can hit cancel and I can go to Alaska and just click on them. And there's nobody in Alaska right now. So by default, there has to be at least one person per group. So that's why we just add the administrator account until everyone gets populated. And again, this is the pre-prod environment. It's not the production environment. So there could definitely be a lot of missing users or old users in there. And then so you have the state discipline lead, then you also have the state technical lead down here. So again, the same: Alaska, Arizona, Alabama. Any other questions?
No, I'm sure I'm going to think of one after we're done, but that's everything that I can think of for me right now.
Great. Yeah, we have the video recording now, so we can review that. Now Bill, you brought up those drop-down lists. So if you wanted to add a new discipline, if you wanted to add a new document type, or you wanted to add a new language, those sort of attributes are under this attribute window here. And you're going to see every single attribute in Quark. Now, if I click on this blank space right above this icon, and I click it twice, now there's ones with the yellow. These are all the ones that I've created. Any of the ones in this blue, those are the ones Quark created, and they are not editable. Again, I strongly recommend to not edit the name of any of these fields, as that will have impact on how the system works behind the scenes. Now, if I go to one, let's say I want to go to document type here, and I double click on this, it's going to bring up a domain. It's going to call select domain. Now, if I want to do these double dots called manage domains, that opens up every attribute domain. So by default, you have users and groups. Again, I don't recommend you editing those. I don't think you can actually. Then you also have lead disciplines. And so this affects the drop down list on the national standard, which lead discipline you can select. And remember, again, we had to switch to the slashes due to the UI error on and signs. So if you wanted to add a new discipline, there were more complex steps than this, but this would be how you add them to the drop down list. There are other places that it would need to be added as well. You have practice codes, which is an old thing that we actually don't use anymore. So this probably can just be deleted. Replace codes. So Bill, you brought the replace codes up. So we could either change it to replace codes to a text file, or text field, or you could keep adding them into the domains list. You then have units. And so here's all of the units here. Now units is a special one because it integrates to CPDES. So right now we are matching up these specifically. So MI exactly as MI has a specific ID number in DES. So if you change it to M space I, that'll break the DES connection. So if you ever want to change these, you'd still need to talk to support so they can change the behind the scenes how it looks. So whenever you, let's say you add a new unit, let's call it squirrel, you already have it. Yeah, let's call it squirrel unit, so SQ. So if you wanted to add squirrel units to DES, you need to send support an email to say squirrel units is now ID number 10. Behind the scenes, they can add squirrel units 10, and then you could add SQ into here, and then that would allow SQ to be transferred to DES for the standards. Everyone understand that?
No, but we just recorded it, so
Right. So in DES, this is one. I'm just hypothetical, right? This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, this is 6, this is 10, this is 11. Hypothetically. So when you hit update CPDES, behind the scenes I grab and go, okay, this standard is using number. Now number is ID 10. So now I tell CPDES that it's 362.10 diversion. And that's all they get. So they don't get this number. So if you were to add a new one, unless you tell us that you have a new one that you want to add or you want to change one of these, it's not gonna know the units whenever you transfer it to DES. It's just gonna say 0. It's not gonna know that they exist. In the same event, same for document types. So here is all of the check in other document types, right? You have CPPE, specification, blah, 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 right? You have all of them here. So you could add a new one to this list. You could add, squirrel drawing on it. For some reason, I like squirrels today. So you could add squirrels on here. But again, you couldn't transfer that document to ePhotog unless you told us to, hey, We're now going to also transfer squirrels to ePhotog. So please add squirrels, and squirrels is number 25. And then we could add squirrels to this list, so you could upload squirrels to Quark. And then you have states as the last one. So if we, for some reason, get a new state or a new territory that you want to add, you can add it to the list. And again, if you add a new state, we have to know which ID number it is in DES, so we can make the mapping between DES and Quark. And then you also have languages, which if you want to add a new language like German, you can add it. But again, we need to know the ID number in CPDES, so we can make the connection for the new ID number for the new language. Any questions?
What's in the National Discipline Lead one?
Oh, yeah. So that is the usernames. Good question, Bill. Sorry, I almost missed them. So yeah, you could, and this has no impact to DES. So yeah, you could add names and change names in here. But I wanted to, we needed to discuss this. So if I was to delete Dana, then any document that had Dana selected it would be removed. So if we need to change National Discipline Lead to a text field so you can write in the name, but I don't know if that would work very well. Or if you want to just keep adding new names to this list, or if you want to just right click and edit them.
So, in terms of what we send to DES, we don't send this name to DES, do we?
Correct. No, we do not.
But we do send the discipline lead type, like if they're this, right? Whether it's AE or CE or whatnot.
I might have to double check that. I'm not sure. I actually don't know if we do that. I will double check it real quick.
Because somehow DES has to know who can change the resource concerns for each standard. Or maybe they let any discipline lead change them and they're just asking. I need to ask Carrie about that. Carrie, you're not on, are you? No, he's not on. My first inclination is if it doesn't go to DES as a metadata field, then we really don't need it in the drop down metadata for the standard, because you know, if we just know that who's the discipline lead, I mean, we know the discipline lead for each standard, that tells us who the discipline lead is. We don't need that added into the metadata. It just becomes a list that we have to maintain. Do things like remove Bob Snikus, who retired, or update the name of the National Ag Engineer once we hire a new one. If it's not really used anywhere, it doesn't serve a purpose in the drop down. If it serves a purpose, if we use it somewhere, it's worth keeping. But if it doesn't, it just becomes an extra thing to maintain with no value.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, Bill. I agree with you.
I'm going to give that some thought, but that's the way that I'm leaning right now. Is if I don't know that one has value. The national team lead has value. Well, does it?
That would appear in the standard status. So again, I think with the national.
Right. Yeah. So we can get that a different way too. And that one doesn't go to DES either, right?
Yeah, so this, again, it's a little crazy format, right? So we're going to do practice code, state county code, language, release date. Actually, these This is an older one. Practice name. Here's the unit number ID, definition, lifespan. This is an old one. So yeah, and there's no lead discipline lead, or team lead, or any of that information.
And we have all that stuff because they are attached because they're groups. If I go to the collection and just add that field, I can see who the team lead is, or I can see who the discipline lead is that way.
Yeah, but
I also can see
it on the
who
query.
modified.
Yeah, you just wouldn't see it on the queries.
Yeah. Okay, I need to give it some thought, but that definitely makes me wonder about the value of those couple metadata fields.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
Dusty,
it's probably too late, Bill, for that, but for the next release or something, definitely something we could do.
Well, I mean,
that-
also, if we don't enter anything in there, it won't hurt anything either, right?
Yeah, I think it's a mandatory field, so it'll make you.
Is it?
Now that would be something we could change. We could make it a non-mandatory field if you want, but removing it it's a little more involved. All right. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording if we're good for that.
Yeah.